Hi, and welcome to Culture Lit, a podcast and community that explores Black women and romantic love through the lens of romance novels. I'm your host, Octavia Marie. Each episode of Culture Lit trains a spotlight on a new Black romance novel and then deep dives into the many themes facing Black women and love after 40. Be ready to laugh, sigh, and talk about Black women falling in love, yes, sex too, and the Black authors writing their stories. We've been on a roller coaster of unprecedented times. Every time I think we're about to make a turn for the better, the world throws more chaos at us. Now, I don't know about you all, but I am tired. And as my daughter said, I'm ready to circle back to precedented times. Like most, during times like this, I've turned to things that bring me joy. My favorite escape? You already know, romance novels. Sometimes it feels like the world doesn't love us, especially Black women. And sometimes we have to escape into a different world. If you're here because of my love of romance novels, you know that I've been reading them for over 20 years. And for a long time, I hid the fact that I read the novels. I was criticized. Most romance readers are criticized. The genre is criticized. It's not held to the same kind of love and standards as any other literary genre. And it can be uncomfortable. Sometimes people would ask, "So what's your guilty pleasure?" And I would say romance novels. And then I got to a point in my life where I realized how fucked up it was that I have to be ashamed of something that brings me so much joy. And today we're going to dive in a little bit more with the mind behind Melanin Mindscape, KP. We're going to talk about unlearning all the ways that we have been told not to enjoy ourselves. And I think talking about it is an incredible place to start. So, KP, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Hello, I'm KP, and I'm the mind behind Melanin Mindscape. Melanin Mindscape is a blog dedicated to all things Black, but especially Black history, Black TV, and Black literature. I'm always posting and reviewing books by Black authors, and when my favorite TV shows are on, I'm recapping them, and I'm sharing Black history all the time. I would love for you to follow me on IG at Melanin Mindscape and visit my blog at melaninmindscape.com. And I'm super excited to be here with you today to discuss one of my favorite things, books. So thanks for having me.
We've known each other for a few years. And I
Mhm.
think when I realized just how horrific a reader you were, and I was like, okay, she's reading way more than me. And I thought I was a big reader. But you read everything. You are into nonfiction, literary fiction, but all things Black. And then
Mhm.
also autobiographies, history. You're everywhere. And you've also even recommended some books to me. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite?
My favorite genre?
Yeah.
That is so hard.
I know. All of it.
Everything now. I don't know if I have a favorite genre. I used to be a nonfiction girl.
Okay.
I very rarely would I, pick up some fiction. But when I really got back into reading, I was just reading everything. I think for me now, it's not necessarily genre, but authors. Maybe that's a better way for me to
Okay.
narrow it down. So if I'm really feeling like I want to, get into politics and history or something, I'm going to find Eddie Glaude, like let's see what he's written about or even, James Baldwin. I mean, you can go cuz that's he wrote a little bit of everything. He's like fiction, nonfiction. He's just done a little bit of everything. It just depends. Like I'm just a reader. Like
Right.
there are a few that I don't like horror.
Yeah.
I'm not a big horror girl
No, me
or
neither.
sci-fi. Yeah, like I don't really do those well.
And I know this, and I know you're a very big, Black history historical, and so a
Mhm.
lot of the books that I would even see on your blog recommended were always a lot of like I sell a lot of nonfiction, but you do a lot of good, great fiction books too. And so one of the things that surprised me, I wanted to have you on, was because this summer you seem to have gone on like a romance novel binge. And so I was like, oh, okay, she
Man,
reads romance too. I didn't know that. And so I was like, I mean, like you went down the rabbit hole kind of bit. And so I thought that was really interesting because that definitely was not something I had seen on your blog before.
uh-huh.
And so I kind of want like, and wanted to kind of dive into that, especially from a reader like you, because what I want to talk about, like, so many people, like I said, this is, about it. not being a guilty pleasure and why we kind of feel shame in things that, we enjoy, especially, so many things are put on Black women and, we can't admit to the things that sometimes bring us joy. And so when you went down that binge, I was like, oh, I've read that one. Oh, she's going to like
Yes,
that one.
you
Ooh,
did
and then it
right,
was,
and then I was mad because I was saying, "Well, why didn't you tell me about this?" I mean, I take suggestions. I say,
a lot of people's like, it's a summer reading thing. So it's like, oh,
Mhm,
it's a beach read. I'm going to take it on
mhm,
vacation
mhm,
because,
yeah,
I
mhm,
think we fall into that. We sometimes kind of justify the things we love by describing it as a guilty pleasure. And that's one of the things I really think we should ban is that, like, things of the idea of pleasure being guilty. But I think Black women absolutely get that because, we're supposed to be these super women and all these things, and, we gotta be productive, and I think even as Black folks, Black folks have to be productive, and so many think of romance and romance novels as, insignificant, but there's some amazing Black writers who are writing Black romance, and who doesn't wanna hear about Black love?
right, yeah.
So, like, for you, I wanted to ask just, for you, just in the beginning, what is your kinda definition of a guilty pleasure?
It's something that I enjoy on the low or
Mhm.
something that I enjoy indulging in that I'm not exactly excited about announcing to the world, but, hmm I agree with you that if it's a pleasure, it just shouldn't be guilty. Like, just
Yeah.
live, have fun, whatever. But yeah, it's just something I like to do that I'm, like, oh, I'm gonna do this, but I may not share it widely.
Right, and then it's like, why do we do that? I think especially I think the pandemic probably has changed the mindset of a lot of people though, because I know, like,
Mhm.
for me, we were, what, 3 years in this thing now, and I think anything that makes it feel like we're taking time away from something that's quote unquote "productive,"
Yes,
like there is value in productivity
productivity.
only,
Mhm.
and then if you doing something that feels unproductive in some way, it's a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, no, I
And
totally agree with that. I cause one of the things I might consider to be a guilty pleasure is that I will take my kids to school and I will drive straight to the spa. And then
right.
I will stay there all day, and then I'll hit the car I'll be back in time for the carpool line.
But why is that a guilty pleasure? Because
That's
really
the thing, because it's like when we're talking about guilty pleasure, and I guess I'm getting better at it, and it does go back to rest
Mhm,
not being seen as being productive,
mhm,
because that's the way we were kinda taught. So I
mhm.
think that most of us are unteaching ourselves that, "Hey, if I'm gonna take this day and I'm gonna do absolutely nothing, it's okay." Because it's what I need, and rest is necessary. Rest is also productive. I know for me, sometimes I just call it a reset. Like,
Mhm.
so much has happened, and I feel myself getting worn down, and I feel like, I need to refill my cup, and I need a hard reset, then I'm okay with doing it and not feeling as guilty as I may have felt, pre-pandemic or
Exactly.
or before, and it's just something that I am learning. I think it's something that we are learning as Black women because we have always been, first and foremost, you got to work twice as hard, and
Mhm.
you have to keep everybody up, your family, everybody's depending on you. I had a mind shift where I look at rest differently now. So I would say yes, my little spa excursions, they're a guilty pleasure, but I am getting to the point where, I don't necessarily care if you know. That is what I'm doing. I took a whole day, I did absolutely nothing except drop my kids off and pick them up, and I'm fine with that, and I'm better for it.
Right.
So, yeah, we do need to get out of there are no guilty pleasures, you know.
Exactly.
Hey girl, hey. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you sign up for our occasional newsletter and join our community at culturelitpodcast.com, where we share book reviews. You can interact with our guests and you'll have a chance to tell me your story and be a part of our community. That's culturelitpodcast.com. Now, back to the show.
So, let me ask you this then. What led you on your binge of romance novel? Was it kind of like that thing where you were just looking to escape? You were looking just to, like what you were saying, kinda reset and,
Mhm.
everything was so heavy, and this has been, like, a really heavy
Few
couple
years.
of years.
Right. So, I was never a non-romance.
Okay. We just didn't talk about
Jasmine Guillory. No, well, I didn't have the blog for the
Oh,
blog is semi-new, so I
okay.
was reading all along, but I wasn't always using Goodreads, or I didn't always have the Instagram. Because there were years where I may have read 50 books, and I may have talked about 10 of them because I was just reading. But Jasmine Guillory is an author that I've always read her books. I'm usually up to date on all of her books. I think right now I'm 2 behind, but
And
I always
I
read
think she's
her.
pretty behind too.
Yeah, yeah, the new one, because there's
Yeah,
one that just came out, and then Buy the Book. I
yeah.
started that one, I
Yeah,
haven't.
buy the book.
Okay, and so that's the one I have to get back to, and then her newest one. So she's been one that I've always been like, "Oh, she has a new book, let me read it." So I've read them sparingly, not for any particular reason, but just
Right.
that. But what's been happening to me a lot lately is that one, I am trying to teach my kids to read all genres. Stretch yourself. You know, I have a kid that's a scientist. He only likes to read science books. I got this other kid who only wants to read graphic novels, right? And so I'm telling them like, hey guys, let's read a little bit of everything. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna take my own advice as well. So what had happened
What
was,
had happened
what what had happened was, I think it might have been a Jasmine Guillory book, and you know how when you finish a book, especially if you're using Goodreads or Audible or Scribd or
you get the
Kindle,
suggestion.
they gonna give you suggestions. "Oh, did you
Right.
like this book? Try this." That's how I got caught up. So, I did that, and I can't remember who it was. It might have been maybe Christina Johnson, and
Good one, she's a good one.
exactly. So I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." Okay, but it was a series,
And so
and
once you
then
read one, you can't not read
you
the other.
can't not read the so that's what happened. So, I was like 4 books in, and then they're like, "Well, if you like that series, just like this the next one."
You're
So
like,
then
"This."
it was crazy. It was 1 month where, and this may be the one that you're talking about, when I posted the books for the month. I think I read like 24 books that month or something,
Yeah,
and it was because of the romance book, because, they're usually shorter
yeah.
than what I'm accustomed to reading. Like, I'm accustomed to a good 300, 400 pages,
Mhm.
so these are shorter, they might be novella, eh, I'm able to read twice as much when I read romances. So, I think that month I went through maybe 2 girl, it was just series after series, and I was like, "You know what? I need to stop." So that's what happened, like, that's why you saw the uptick, because I got sucked in.
And then I was like, "Oh, well, okay, I got a couple you haven't read. Oh, you haven't
Uh-huh,
read this one."
uh-huh. And now I have to be intentional about starting one of their books, like Christina C. Jones, or another one, Mika James.
Mika
I
James.
got caught up and ended up having to read all of the series where they're in this coastal island. I think it was 4 books. So now I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna start reading a Christina Johnson, and 9 times out of 10, it's gonna be a series, and I'm gonna have to be prepared to be 5 books in, because
Okay.
whatever. So that's what was happening to me when you saw that explosion. I was getting caught up in
So,
series.
let me ask you this because I know you are a big history buff.
Mhm.
Have you gotten into any of the Black historical romance, like Beverly Jenkins? Like, she has like, I just absolutely know you would love her because she goes so in depth with the research and the
Mhm.
historical part of it is so a lot of it is based on real characters and real things. So have you kinda dived into any of that?
I'm saving her, because several people have told me that I need to get on her stuff, and I looked,
And you
and there were
have to
like a
start from
million
the
books.
beginning.
You're right. So I said, "Okay, wait a minute. I'm gonna save her," because I feel like if I start, I'm gonna wanna finish, and she has a lot out there.
She has a lot out there and a lot of
Yeah.
connected characters. Yeah. I remember when I first started reading I actually might have started with a Beverly Jenkins novel, and it was Indigo. It was based in Michigan and was about a woman that was a slave that used to be a slave on an indigo plantation, and her hands were stained blue. And so, like, I found myself when I started reading her books, I found myself like stopping in the middle of it and then looking up some of the
Mhm,
historical facts that were in the book.
mhm.
So
I
it took
love it.
me forever to read. And I just know I was like, oh, she's got to. And I know how much you love Black historical. So, like, yeah.
Mhm.
But a lot of her, even her more recent ones, are connected to characters. They're like descended from characters in earlier books.
And I wanna start at the beginning. So
Yeah, yeah, and then she has like, there are series that are about the Black cowboys. There is, like,
mhm.
the French Creole and Louis like, they're all over. She has I mean, she's touched, like, a lot of different historical stuff, and I was like, "Oh, let me see if this really happened."
I'm
Oh,
gonna
this
get on it. I just
So
know it's a lot, and so I was like, "Let me just, you know,
yeah,
Imma figure out how
that's
I'm
gonna
gonna
be
get through all of it."
yeah, because once you started, like, that's really once I started, it's like, "Well, I gotta get the next one." Like,
See?
what?
And that's what was happening to me with all the other ones.
And so,
So
some like Christina Jones.
yes, and even Tia Williams.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I love Tia Williams.
Yeah, so, 7 Days in June, I read that, and it was amazing, and then I had to go backwards
You had to go back and get the
to
other
get all the
other
rest yeah, to get all the rest of Tia's books, so that's kinda how things are popping up for me, and I try my hardest at the beginning of each month to give myself some type of book map because I have, like, reading ADD. Like, I'll be all over the place. And if I hear on NPR somebody talking about their book,
Yeah,
"Ooh, I'm starting that today." Like,
I
I
so
can't
many
and that's one of the reasons why I love libraries, but services like Scribd and Audible and Kindle work better for me, and I'll just rather pay for it because I can't be in line waiting for the book. I gotta read it today. I said, if it's I gotta read it today. Is it dropping today? I need to read it today. So, because I'm like that, it's hard for me. It's just hard for me, and that's why I said about Beverly Jenkins, right?
Yeah,
Beverly Jenkins, um, that I was gonna try to quiet my mind and figure out how I was going to attack her body of work.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'll send you some suggestions since I've read most of them.
Yeah, you know
Read
what? That would be helpful. Um, uh, if you could prioritize them for me,
I absolutely will.
that's kinda what I need, like, 'cause yeah, 'cause I get rabbit holes,
Yeah,
they
you
get me.
you absolutely will go down a rabbit
Yeah.
hole.
Yeah.
Do you consider reading romance a guilty pleasure?
No.
No. Okay. And I wonder, especially for Black women, and you may, have an idea, but why do you think that people have been led that reading or writing or enjoying romance now is such a shameful thing, especially for Black folk? We've been taught to kind of be ashamed of Black love, I guess.
Mhm,
And especially since the pandemic, publishing as a genre, how much it increased. But
mhm.
the number one genre for the last several years, as far as money, has been romance. It's
'Cause women
it's the
read,
selling genre.
'cause women read, and Black
Because
women read.
but they don't think we do.
But we do. We do, but I thought I maybe I hoped. I thought that myth had been dispelled with Terry McMillan.
Exactly.
Like, when, she was hot, every Black woman I knew had that book in the salon, had her books in
Mhm.
the salon, right? I just feel like, yeah, Black women, we've always been readers.
Yeah.
I don't know why people think we don't read.
You look at the statistics, the largest segment of readers are Black women.
Right.
So
Yeah.
then,
Yeah,
like, wonder
and,
who
like,
does
so
not read about Black love.
right, right, and, I just think that books are like anything else where there's a spectrum.
Right.
I tell people all the time that people ask me, "Well, why how can I read more?" And I always say, "Well, in order to read more, you have to read more." Like, read a few at a time because we are all very moody people.
Mhm.
And if you have, like, I like to have a book in maybe 3 different genres going at the same time
Okay.
because I'm not in the mood. I'm not in the same mood every day.
Exactly.
Right. So it's like on this day, I may not feel like reading about the Civil War, but I might feel like something a little light.
Right.
So I might go for the romance. It's just like Netflix asking you how you feeling today, what you in the mood for? Comedy, drama, it's the same thing. I think books are the same thing. It's not that one is necessarily better than the other. I think it's just more of how are you feeling? If you read according to your mood, I think you will read a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And so there are times when people do want to turn on Netflix and watch a rom-com
Uh,
or just a romance.
Exactly. And I also think it comes back to this idea, and we're coming back to of pleasure being somehow less valuable than pain and happiness, being less valuable than, say, trauma. And so when we talk about we talk about pleasure and talk about physical pleasure in a lot of places, obviously there are all sorts of romance novels, but the majority of them focus on physical pleasure, pleasure for people who are not allowed to, especially when we're talking about Black romance novels and the world is not allowed to talk about it and experience that kind of, love, happiness, in public and through other forms of media. And so when you look at some of the stuff, now we're seeing a few, like one of Tia Williams' books is being turned into a movie. And when I saw that the Bridgerton series was coming out, I was like, I'd rather see some of Beverly Jenkins was
Right.
turned into
Yeah. Yeah.
like, I think that plays a part in it too. That going back to pleasure is not as valuable as pain and trauma.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's how we've been taught as far as maybe there's a book hierarchy
Yes,
because a romance author is not gonna win the Pulitzer. Right.
exactly. Yep.
And when we're in school and we're reading what they tell us we have to read, it's not gonna be a romance. It's
Hmm.
not gonna be, in my opinion, reading the required reading in school was horrible for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I read it, but I didn't enjoy it. And, the books that they choose, it's probably stunted a lot of people, honestly. It's probably the reason why a lot of people don't read after they leave school. But what society has deemed worthy is very, very removed from romance novels.
Hmm.
Even I won't say even fiction, but I'll say black fiction. It just depends. Like the only people I think that have really broken that would be like a Toni Morrison.
Yes. Yes.
Where well, if they allow you to, where you will study her work, right?
Right.
And
Right.
but then you still have people who I think are just as much as a genius as Toni Morrison, like Audre Lorde, that you could go through your whole schooling, high school and college, and they have never heard of her.
Exactly.
So it's subjective, of course. And then there's this hierarchy, of the books that society as a whole are going to lift up. It's
Ex
not, it's not going to be the romance. And I
exactly.
mean, in a way, I get it because you're taught for a book to have, this worthiness, right? You're looking for symbolism and character arcs and, all those things you're taught to look for in a book. You may not necessarily see that in a romance book. But what I have found out about these romance books is that, especially being a black woman, is that I can relate to the women,
Mhm.
not even about their romances, but just about their lives.
Just life.
Like
Exactly.
right, like, that college educated woman, this happens, and, there's always something that I can relate to
Mhm.
from these characters, even if it's a character that if you looked at me and you looked at her, you'd be like, "Nah, y'all had nothing in common." But you can see yourself. You can see yourself in them, and so I think even though they're never gonna be on the level of Shakespeare because, everybody loves to talk about him, right? I don't think we're ever gonna get there.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, I think that even though these romance stories might not be as quote unquote deep or as symbolic, I think there's still worth
Mhm.
in the stories, right? It's just
Yeah.
like, there's worth in all of these people's stories because they really not that far off from real life.
Yeah, and there's some really great writers that incorporate. I mean, I bring you back to Tia Williams when I read 7 Days in June, it was such a the romance was almost a secondary character to the rest of what was
Exactly.
going on in that book, and it was
Yes.
all very relatable,
Mhm.
very relatable stuff. And even now, I'm seeing another episode that we're talking about curvy women and Black women and why some women are worthy of love and some are not. And
Mm.
then one of the recent books I read, Savvy Sheldon, the book Savvy Sheldon, even that one kind of
Oh, I
resonated
like
with
that
me.
one.
I, I was almost like, is this about to go where I think? And I almost put it down. I promise you, I was like, oh, here we go.
Mhm,
It's one of
mhm.
those books like she got to lose weight in order to find the love,
Yeah,
and I
but
was
that
like,
really wasn't what it was about.
but it wasn't. And I stuck
It
with
was
it, and
about
I stuck
her.
with it, but it ended up being about her, and I thought she was going to go
Mhm.
through that. I was like, oh Lord, it's one of those.
Yeah, no, it was a total opposite of what, and I guess that goes back to what I was saying is that, like you said, the romance and the sex is secondary.
The secondary,
Like, this was about her. Yes, she got dumped by her boyfriend. In her mind, she couldn't do better
yes,
than him. But being dumped made her realize, "I need to be better for me."
exactly, exactly.
And that was the story. And so I think that that's the worth. Like, when you can take a story, you could take something with you. I love it when a book kinda stays with me. It could be the smallest thing. Like, for Savvy, it was like, "Hey, I need to make myself happy,
Hmm.
and looking a certain way is gonna make me happy." But the goal is my overall well-being, right?
Right,
It wasn't necessarily about the weight.
right,
Like, she wasn't about, like, "I gotta lose 10 pounds. I gotta lose 20 pounds."
yeah,
It was like, "I'm gonna make all these life changes, and
exactly.
as a result, I'm gonna be a better me." I was reading something, I don't know what it was, and the person was saying, like, you should never feel guilty for reading something because a book can mean anything to anyone.
Right.
And so for somebody who might have body issues,
Yes.
Savvy Sheldon might have been the book
It changed it. Yeah.
to change or help them deal with whatever they're going through. And so that's why I think we don't, you can't just throw away romance novels because these women are telling real stories.
Real stories, real,
Mhm.
what we're really dealing with. One of the things I like, what I came to realize, read a romance, enjoy life, enjoy the possibilities of what love has in store for us all.
I
And
think I'm schizophrenic. I think I'm a schizophrenic reader. And what I was telling one of my friends was that what I've started to kind of do sometimes is that I'll use romance as a buffer.
yeah.
Like, I'll read like 400 souls, and then I'll be like, what Christina got going on?" It's just real, it's like people say about their music choices, like, if you put it on shuffle, like, you never know what you're gonna come up with.
Right. It's like a palate cleanser sometimes.
That's how I use it. I use it as a reset, like, yeah, yeah, and sometimes like I said, when I try to do my book maps, I try to just leave space. I do love Black history, Indigenous history, and if I'm reading a book that I know is gonna be crazy in a bad way, like, "Wow, that happened," and I might have 2 of those that are in my mind I wanna get read in a month, then I'll think it through, like, "Hey, okay, so in between this book and this book, Imma maybe read 2 romance books." Or whatever. But sometimes that goes crazy because, again, a series will get you. Then I'll get stuck, and then it'll be like 5 books later, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, let me go back to my academic." So, yeah, it's just, like, for me, it's just you never know what you're gonna get when the end of the month comes and I post my book. You never
Yeah.
know.
Oh, she done put up another list. Ooh, I need to read that. Ooh, that. Ooh, what's that about?
Right. Yeah, and it's schizophrenic. It's all over the place.
So, okay, so you've gone down this, you found all these new authors and books from the summer. Who's been your favorite new author you discovered, Black romance authors?
Oh, gosh. Very hard. That's very hard.
There's so many great authors and stories
Well, Tia Williams, we already talked about. She made 7 Days in June made my top 10 books.
of the year.
For
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it was that good.
it was really good.
Yeah. I feel like that might be her best.
And at the end of it, I felt like you don't know if they stay together.
Mhm. It was right. It coulda gone either way.
Like you don't have it doesn't feel closed, but it's like a
Mhm.
happy for now. It was a happy for
Mhm.
now book. And I was like, I wonder if because it feels like they both still have some stuff to kinda work through, so it's like, do they stay
Most
together?
definitely. We needed a long epilogue.
Yeah. Maybe
Or
she's working on a sequel
a
because I feel like
sequel.
it needs a sequel.
It felt sequel-y,
Yeah.
so I don't know. Books I have loved. Let me say, I do like the authors where the series includes a set of siblings. I
Okay.
don't know why I'm
Yeah,
drawn to that.
yeah.
So, Christina C. Johnson has I think hers is the Wright brothers,
The Wright brothers.
and
Love the Wright
then
brothers.
you love the Wright brothers, and
Love the Wright
then,
brothers.
okay, Nicole Falls has the Holiday Sisters.
Oh, yeah, the Holiday Sisters.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I those are 2 that stand out for me, and a new one is Jamie Wesley.
Oh, I love Jamie Wesley. Okay.
Yeah, so Fake It Till You Bake It is her latest,
Mhm.
and
That was
Fake It Till
last
You
year.
Bake
Her
It
sister's book was
was it
just
last year? Okay, so we did a book club, the Book Girl Magic Book Club had her, she came to the book club meeting, and
Oh,
then
okay.
I started reading all her other stuff because I had never heard of her until Fake It Till You Bake It.
Yeah.
So then I started reading her other stuff, and I really liked her, but if I had to just pick a favorite, it's probably Christina Johnson and
Mhm.
Nicole Falls.
Nicole Falls. I love Nicole Falls.
Yeah,
Well,
probably.
thank you for joining me. This has been quite an adventure. Again, it is KP from Melanin Mindscape. Her Instagram and blog will be linked in the podcast, so make sure you follow her and show her some love. Thank you again, KP,
Thank you.
and we'll see you soon.
Alright, sounds good.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Culture Lit with Octavia Marie, and that's all for us this week. Be sure to listen, download, or subscribe to more episodes of Culture Lit. You can find Culture Lit on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple listeners, please be sure to leave a review and let us know what you think. Don't forget to talk to me on social or share your Black love stories at Becoming Octavia Marie on Instagram or XO Octavia Marie on Twitter. Make sure you sign up for our occasional newsletter and join our community at culturelitpodcast.com.